So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to take a second just to introduce myself and thank Joe for being with us. Thank all of the participants who are here viewing the forum. We're so excited to have you here. My name is Jacole Kitchen. I am the Artistic Programs Manager and Local Casting Director for La Jolla Playhouse, but I am here today in my role as Executive Director of the San Diego Performing Arts League, which covers a number of member theaters, many of whom are in District 5, including Scripps Ranch Theater. We are so excited for a great turnout today. This is the fourth of 5 scheduled forums focusing on arts and culture. There has been one for each council position being elected this year. So we're so excited for the arts and culture groups for coming together to make this happen. A couple of those groups are the Balboa Park Cultural Partnership, the San Diego Regional Arts and Culture Coalition, and Arts and Culture San Diego. Thank you all so much for making this happen. The core questions that we're going to be asking are the same for all candidates across the city, no matter which district they will be representing. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to George Moy, Cindy Stankowski, and Dave Brooks. George, take it away.
Hi, my name is George Moy. I am the Managing Director for Scripps Ranch Theater. We are a professional theater located on the campus of Alliant University. And we were in the middle of our 41st season when everything came to a screeching halt through the COVID-19 pandemic. In a typical season, we offer 5 full-length plays, which may include a musical. And we finish our season with the Out on a Limb Festival, which celebrates emerging artists. In addition, we have an outreach program that brings live theater into schools, a summer theater camp. As well, we have a program with San Diego Playwrights where we do live staged readings of new works by local playwrights. On top of all of this, we also get a myriad of other things that come our way and that we produce as they come along. And we reach thousands of people every year and bring them from all over San Diego into District 5. Cindy, let's hear from you.
Thank you for asking me to participate in this important forum. I'm Cindy Stankowski, the Executive Director of the San Diego Archaeological Center. We're in District 5 near the Safari Park. Our mission is simple: to preserve archaeological artifacts and share them with the public through exhibits, educational programs, and research. We curate over 1.4 million artifacts that document 12,000 years of human history. I bet you didn't know that. We plan on opening to visitors on October 8th in celebration of California Archaeology Month. Until then, please visit our website, sandiegoarchaeology.org, for more information about our virtual programs for K-12 students as well as adults. And David, how about you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Cindy. I've been a part of the Spirit of the Fourth Committee since 2001 and president since 2015. This all-volunteer group in Rancho Bernardo has conducted a day-long celebration of our nation's birthday since 1969, but not in 2020, of course. We begin the day with a community fair, which includes a motor show, a patriotic pet contest, a quilt show, and booths for vendors and community groups. In the afternoon, we have a parade, which includes about 400 students marching in bands from all 5 high schools in the Poway Unified School District. As the sun sets, we move to the fields at RB High School, where we have a live band followed by fireworks. We sponsor 2 talent competitions called RB Star and RB Senior Star. The winners are in the parade and also perform before the crowd at the fireworks. Over the day, we estimate we see 15,000 attendees at these events. Thanks, and I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you so much, Dave, George, and Cindy. And on a personal note, George, I am very thankful for the Out on a Limb Festival at Scripps Ranch Theater, because that's where I got my very first directing gig. My start as a directing artist came right there at your theater. Thank you, in District 5. Thank you so much. So Joe, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for participating in this forum.
Thanks for having me. This is great. I'm excited.
Wonderful. We have a number of attendees from arts and culture organizations who have tuned in from District 5 and from all around the city. So right now, would love to just give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. You have up to 5 minutes to let us know what we should know about you and why you're running.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. Well, I am Joe Leventhal, running for San Diego City Council. I'm not from here originally, grew up in Los Angeles, and because of where Jacole is right now, I've got to say I found San Diego by way of UC San Diego, and before we started, we were just talking about the La Jolla Playhouse and what a wonderful gem that is there for frankly everybody in the region, but also for students, and how underappreciated probably most students it's not appreciated fully by most students in realizing what they have there in terms of a world-class institution. But I am, I've lived here almost 20 years now of my life, and I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I really decided to run for office because I want to be someone that can make the region better and stronger. I've focused on giving back to the community in a lot of different ways. I'm very proud in particular of the several years that I've spent involved with Kids Included Together. It's a nonprofit that focuses on kids with disabilities. But I've given back in a lot of other ways as well, given back to our local schools, spent a lot of times, frankly, focused on issues of equity and justice in our federal legal system. And frankly, I've spent probably anywhere from 200 to 400 hours a year on community service efforts because the community is really important to me. I'm actually a relatively new, proud member of the Rancho Bernardo Rotary, which I find really rewarding as well, and look forward to being able to give even more time to the Rotary once the election is over. Professionally, I'm a lawyer and a business owner. Started my own law firm several years back, grew that and merged into a national law firm and started the San Diego office of that national law firm. And I'm currently on the board of directors and on the finance committee for that firm. And so I have a broad, what I call somewhat of a broad business experience, where I've dealt with small businesses where it's just me and I've grown that small business. And I've dealt with more medium-sized businesses that have multiple locations and things like my current firm. Arts and culture are very important to me and to my family. I've got to share a story. My wife actually, I have zero talent. That's why I'm running for office. So my wife, though, has all the talent in the family, and hopefully she passes it on to our kids that are 12, 11, and 9. But she grew up singing and doing live theater. And so our very first date actually was at the Poway Performing Arts Center, where we saw a live show, although I was in the audience and she was on stage because she was performing in the show. And we went to dinner after, but in the show, she actually, has a kiss with another actor. And so I like to joke that our first date, I saw my wife kiss another man. But it's a very important part of our family. We value it greatly. And frankly, for the region, for San Diego as a whole, not only the city, but San Diego as a whole, arts and culture are tremendously important. Like it is, frankly, in any culture, in any country, in any city, in any region, it's critically important. But it's also very important for San Diego and for its economy. And so many people come and visit San Diego because of what we have to offer that's unique here in terms of arts and culture. So it's important to me, and I certainly look forward to answering questions and talking more about it.
Wonderful. That is fantastic. Thank you so much for all of that. All right, without further ado, let's get to some questions from our panelists. So just so you know, attendees at our first forum submitted a number of these questions ahead of time. We're asking, as we said, we're asking all of these questions to the candidates. And today we're going to start off also with the questions that have already come in, but we will also be taking questions from the Q&A as it comes later. To get us started, George, do you have a question for Joe?
Yes, Joe, thank you for being here today. It's great to meet you from a distance.
Yes.
Arts and culture organizations are essentially small businesses. Like all small businesses, they've been hit hard by COVID. Unlike for-profit businesses, they were unable to access the city's recent small business recovery funding. When we emerge from this pandemic, we are likely going to see a devastated, if not severely hobbled, arts and culture sector. There will be immediate and longer-term recovery needs. Would you support city investment or even a special recovery fund to assist the arts, culture, and creativity sector's recovery during the COVID-19 shutdown and future reopening, and ensure that any funding or recovery plan for small businesses also include nonprofit organizations?
So the short answer is yes. And it would be real easy for me to just leave it at that and say yes. I'd be lying to you if I didn't say we're going to be having some real tough challenges as a city when we're looking at the next budget because of our decimated sales tax and in particular our TOT taxes. However, I do think that we need to include nonprofits, in particular those in arts and culture, in our recovery efforts. And I've talked in other contexts about how I'd like to see us as a city do things like, waive licensing fees for a period of time for small businesses. And so again, if the city is going to be making, and I'm not sure they will, that's one of my positions I'd like to advocate for, but if we're going to advocate for things like that to make businesses thrive, I think we also need to look at incentives to help the arts and culture community thrive. And again, it goes back to what I said sort of in the introduction, which is, the arts and culture community is so important for tourism. And I'd love to see if we could have some help, financial help to the arts and culture organizations, nonprofits, so that we encourage and incentivize more and more people to come here to San Diego and participate in what we have to offer in our arts community. And so, that might look like things like, subsidizing entrance fees for people that come from out of town to really try and help drive more tourists here and tourism dollars here that frankly will pay for itself in a lot of cases because those tourists are paying for, hotel rooms, restaurants, and other things as well. So absolutely, I support it. I think we need to think creatively about how we do that. There's gonna be a lot of people that need a lot of help, but I definitely think that we should not overlook arts and culture.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Dave, I believe that you have a very popular question from our attendees regarding capital investment.
I do, Jacole. The city owns several arts and cultural facilities across the city, among them downtown theaters, Liberty Station buildings, and of course, Balboa Park. Many of these facilities have significantly deferred maintenance and their surrounding infrastructure is badly underfunded. Question, do you support and will you commit to pushing for the creation of a viable action plan to fund Balboa Park deferred maintenance, infrastructure, and facilities, as well as increased support for city-owned cultural assets across the city?
So yes, and I think that again, in other contexts, I talk about the importance of investing in our infrastructure and making sure that we don't unnecessarily delay. It's easy for people politically to want to push off needed infrastructure improvements because it's not sexy and it's not something people notice when things are kept up with. It's things people notice when things aren't kept up with. But it's so much more expensive. It's exponentially more expensive to address those costs and those needs if you delay them and don't keep up with frankly normal maintenance schedules. So I think it's critically important that we protect the city assets and we invest in those city assets and we make sure that we are keeping up with what's needed. And again, I keep bringing it back. I am a business person, and it's not that I've said this in other contexts before. You can't, when it comes to arts and culture, there's a benefit that you can't always quantify financially, and it's important that we invest even if we can't quantify the financial return on the investment. But it's in so many cases, particularly here in San Diego, we can quantify the financial return on an investment, and so even more reason why we should make sure we are investing in the physical structures and places and locations that we have for our arts and culture. And I do want to say, Dave, that is one of the nicest step stools I see behind you there. I had to zoom in to make sure that's what it was. Very, very attractive.
See, I appreciate that you see art everywhere, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And Joe, we actually have another very popular question from our audience. Cindy, do you want to take that one?
I'm happy to. Obviously, the topic is funding for arts and culture here. And as one of the many organizations outside of Balboa Park, funding is even harder for us. Currently, 4 cents of every dollar of the transient occupancy tax, or TOT, raised by the city is dedicated to the promotion of the city. In 2012, City Council passed a resolution called Penny for the Arts and Culture. It promised that 1 cent of that 4-cent portion would go toward support for arts and culture programs and institutions. Unfortunately, this resolution was treated more as a guideline, not as a requirement. Therefore, funding for arts and culture has always fallen far short of the goal, and every year we're forced to engage in fierce advocacy to secure even a fraction of the promised funding. My question is, do you support fully funding the Penny for the Arts and Culture plan, a mere 9.52% of the TOT? And would you support an ordinance that demands a maximum 4-year phased-in timeline to make this promise a budget requirement rather than being treated as a loose guideline?
So I definitely support Penny for the Arts and making sure that we get back to where we originally, in my view, committed to, for 2 reasons. One is I believe in ethics and living up to promises, and so even though I wasn't on the council that committed to that, I think it's important that we honor that. I also think the TOT tax that's paid is really meant, and again, this goes back to the fiscal side of things, but it was really meant to promote tourism. That's kind of the whole concept behind it. And unfortunately, again, and I'm not blaming any individuals, but both sides of the aisle historically have been using the TOT essentially as a slush fund to cover whatever else is needed in the, that's not covered by the general fund. And so this is where, again, I think those dollars should be invested in the things that really do bring tourists here. Now, the one part I'll say in this, the caveat, is the timeline. I haven't looked at the specifics of the timeline, whether 4 years is too aggressive or whether, it would need to be 5 or 6 years or something like that. I wouldn't want to mislead anyone into thinking that I'm 100% on board with the 4-year timeline, but we've got to get there, and we have to have a concrete, solid, and committed plan to get there in the short term, not 15, 20 years, but something in the short term.
And follow up, will you commit to always including achieving and maintaining Penny for the Arts and Culture as a top priority in all budget discussions and initial and revised budget memorandums?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We love a nice, simple answer in this business. We don't get them in politics too often, so I appreciate that last answer.
Absolutely. I'm a lawyer too, so that makes it even harder.
Perfect. So current events have been an influence on a number of the questions we received. George, why don't you take the next one?
As part of the mayor's commitment to a city that works for all, the commission has made great strides to ensure that the resources it manages are distributed in an equitable manner. To support this, the commission has launched a diversity, equity, and inclusion assessment, a 3-part initiative to assess our success and deficits and ensure that the commission is equipped to provide public sector work within the city's diverse communities. How would you work with the commission to ensure that access, equity, and diversity remain a priority for all neighborhoods?
Well, I would make it a priority for sure. One of the things I've said before as well is that, we have 9 council districts, and they're really artificial boundaries. They're political boundaries. They're not reflective of how people live their lives. And so, George, you're sitting there in Scripps Ranch, but I know a lot of people in Scripps Ranch, for example, go to the Mira Mesa Senior Center, which is in a different council district. So we do need to think about making sure people have access to, and of course this goes well beyond just arts and culture, but make sure people have access to arts and culture and lots of other things we talk about in our society. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're trying to, put live theater, we're not counting necessarily how many live theater shows we have in District 5 and comparing that with District 7. But what it means is, are we actually making sure people have access? And sometimes that also means financial access. We can put world-class events somewhere in someone's district and say, well, great, now they've got access to it. But if they actually don't have access to it because of the cost, it's cost prohibitive, then we haven't really given access to people. So, it's not, in my view, not my job to micromanage folks' like you that I think are better equipped to advocate for and articulate where those inequities are and where there's a lack of diversity and inclusion, and educate people like me that might be on the council, and advocate for how we make access to arts and culture more inclusive. But again, it is a priority of mine, and I think it's critically important that we keep that in mind when we're talking about funding in particular for arts and culture.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Time is going by fairly quickly. Thank you so much for your wonderful, thorough answers, Joe. We have one more question that we'd like to address from the panel, and then we're going to see if we have some time to take some questions from the attendees. Dave, do you have a question?
Yes, Nicole. San Diego has an incredibly diverse, culturally and historically rich arts and culture community, but it lacks the level of engagement and support from the city that many other world-class cities have enjoyed. Right now, there's an effort to create planning and engagement from the city to foster the strength of the arts, culture, and creative communities through a culture plan and a cultural affairs department that would ensure planning is implemented. Question: do you support the creation of a cultural affairs department and the development of a citywide cultural plan that would elevate arts and culture as an industry critical to the economic health and quality of life in San Diego?
So I definitely support a plan, a citywide plan for arts and culture. As far as the creation of a separate department, here's what I am concerned about when it comes to the creation of a separate department. There are so many wonderful people engaged in arts and culture in the city and in the region. Again, we're talking about a city, but a lot of these things don't stop at the city border for the city of San Diego. So there are a lot of people that are very active and very involved. And what I want to make sure of is that if we are going to create anything new, that we aren't leaving people out. The table can only be so big. And so are we able to create something that truly is reflective of the diverse arts and culture community and opportunities we have in the region? Or are we creating something that maybe represents the most influential and powerful interests in the community? So I'm absolutely open to it. I'm very supportive of having a citywide or region-wide arts and culture plan, because again, I think it is under-supported. And when you do go to other cities, you see so much more emphasis on the arts and culture from sort of a organizational standpoint than I think we see here in the city of San Diego or the region. So I support that goal, and I'm not sure a new department is the way to achieve it. But if it ultimately ends up that is the best way to achieve it, then I would support that. Again, I really worry though about the potential lack of inclusion when you.
Okay, I found this on the web for why this thing's.
Sorry, my Siri thought I was talking to it. I am concerned about the potential lack of inclusion, given the diverse interests in the arts and culture community, and I'd be concerned about that first and foremost.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It sounded like Siri had a follow-up question, but we're not going to take Siri's question. We do have just a couple of more minutes left. So what I would love to do is see if we can start to take some of our audience questions. Cindy, I believe you have a question from the audience.
Because of the drop in TOT, city funding for school-based arts programs has been slashed. So our question is, when do you think is tamed? What are your priorities for creating access and inclusion in arts exposure and arts learning for San Diego children in our public schools and for families who have been economically distressed by the events since March 2020?
That's a tricky one, and I don't know that it's unique to public schools. I mean, my wife and I, again, have been very active in our local public schools to try and help supplement the funding for things specifically like arts and culture. I mean, we grew up in a time where it was just a given that you would have access to that in your public schools. And actually, we thought, I recall, we thought at the time that we could even use more than our public schools had when we were kids. And now it's considered in a lot of ways a luxury, and that's before COVID even hit. So we've been very active in our schools in trying to make sure the schools have our schools, at least near where we are, and our kids have those resources. But we know not everyone has those same supplemental incomes for their public schools. And so again, it goes back beyond just the schools. The city council doesn't have control over our public schools. And so there's little that can be done with respect to this issue, specifically with the schools. But if the parents that live near those schools have more access to arts and culture, then the children that go to those schools have more access to arts and culture. And so again, I think it goes beyond just our kids in public schools, but making sure everybody in the city of San Diego has equal access, or as equitable access as we can make it.
Absolutely. And this is a conversation that feels like it could just go on and on forever. Thank you so much, but we do have time. I am just hearing from the powers that be that we have time to take one more question. Wonderful. George. Yes, George, do you have a question?
Yes, we have a question from Anonymous that says, can you tell us more about your experience with arts and culture in District 5?
That's a great question. I'll be honest. Most of my experience with arts and culture in District 5 have been seeing my kids in their own performances and things like that. The one area I would say is the museum at the Rancho Bernardo Winery that I really enjoy going to. I really enjoy history, and so I love going to the museum there and seeing what's new. And frankly, supporting it however I can.
It's not just the wine now, is it?
No, it isn't. In fact, it's almost never the wine. It's often the hot chocolate. Again, I've got 3 little kids, so it's often the hot chocolate there, not the wine. But I mean, that's probably the most dominant experience that I think of when I think about District 5. Honestly, I just can't wait until my kids are a little bit older, or particularly my son, who's a little bit of a squirrely 9-year-old, and we can take him to more live performances and really expose them. Again, like I said, it's just been, it was just part of who my wife was. And I really hope someday, my middle one is very much of a performer. So I actually hope that my middle one gets on stage at some point as well. It'd be a lot of fun to go see her too.
Well, Scripps Ranch Theater is in District 5. We'd love to see you in the audience.
I will be there as soon as COVID's over. I'm excited to be there.
And Joe, I'm going to actually take the last question if you don't mind.
Sure.
I would love to hear what you see the connection is between the arts and mental health, and how you can envision supporting that aspect.
Absolutely. Well, mental health generally is a big issue for me. My mom suffered from mental health her entire adult life, mental health challenges her entire adult life. And arts and culture is so important. I mean, it's the emotion that you feel when you see, in particular, someone performing live on stage or singing. You can't replicate. I mean, you can't replicate that from watching it on a TV or even a movie screen or, computer screen. And again, I think that's part of why we need to make sure that people have equitable access to arts and culture, because there is, again, I think, at least from a mental health standpoint, there's absolutely that benefit. I think, unfortunately, with COVID, we're seeing, if you're looking at some of the statistics, we're seeing that, being locked up in our houses essentially and not having those opportunities to interact as humans, that human element, that human nature of wanting to interact and see things and experience things and feel that emotion. And that's what arts and culture is all about. That and education. I think, education is also critically important. It maybe doesn't touch quite as much on the mental health aspect. But certainly on the performance side of arts and culture, I think it's absolutely essential.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much for answering our questions, Joe. And having heard these questions today, is there anything else you would like for us to know? The floor is yours. You have up to 5 minutes.
Wow, 5 minutes. Great. Thank you. No, I just really appreciate the opportunity. You know, there are so many challenges in our city. There's so many challenges in the region. When we were running for office in the primary, COVID hadn't happened. You know, the national dialogue of race and equity wasn't as prevalent as it is now. It has been in the past. And so the issues that we're talking about at the city level are different than we were talking about in March and in February. And through it all, unfortunately, things like arts and culture often are not talked about. And so I think it's extremely important to have this type of conversation. I think it's extremely important for all of you who care about arts and culture to speak up, not only during the election, but after the election. You know, I hope to be elected, and I hope that you hold my feet to the fire and make sure, as other people are pulling at me for attention, that you remind me of what your needs are, and you know, my door will always be open. I'm running against somebody who you're about to meet, who's a great person as well, and so, you know, if she gets elected, please, you know, make sure you're doing the same thing with her, and frankly, do the same thing with the other council members as well. Because you know, there are a lot of interests in the city that have very active and well-funded lobbies, and arts and culture is not one of them, for understandable reasons. There are a lot of nonprofits in the arts and culture world. Doesn't mean that it's any less important, and frankly, in a lot of ways, it's going to be more important. So I really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day to listen to what I have to say. If you do have other questions for me that you didn't get answered today, I saw some. I actually never saw the ones that were being asked to me from the audience in the chat or the Q&A, so I'm not sure where I was looking. But if you had questions and I didn't have a chance to answer them, feel free to reach out on my website, joeforsandiego.com, joeforsandiego.com. At the contact form, it goes straight to me, goes straight to my email. So I'm happy to call you, happy to respond by email, whatever you like, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you didn't get answered today. And again, just really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you so much for your willingness to continue the dialogue offline, since we had a limited amount of time here. And just a huge thank you to George, Cindy, and Dave for joining us today and for all of your questions.